Good morning, everybody. Will DuPree here in the KXAN live studio. This week, if you didn't know, was a pretty big deadline that passed here in Texas politics. It was the filing deadline on Monday, so people who want to be on the ballot for next March in the Texas primary had to file all their paperwork so they could be on that ballot. And of course, we want to talk about all the candidates who are running, some of the big marquee races. And to do that, we have some pretty important guests here in the studio with me today. We have KXAN's political reporter, Phil Prazan, right there. He's waving to you guys there at home, as well as Tyler Mitchell with the Texas Democratic Party. He is the Candidate Services Director. Welcome both to you here this morning to talk about all of this. I think that we should maybe start with the biggest race of all, the one that's going to draw the most attention, and that's, of course, the presidential primary. A lot of Democrats running. Tyler and Phil, take it away from there.
Well, first, for somebody who doesn't know, what's a candidate service director do for this filing deadline? What's your role on this thing?
Yeah, so I and my department work to recruit and support candidates up and down the ballot. So that's everyone from our Senate candidates down to our county level races. And so with so many, as Will was talking about, with so many people running for president, people are watching the Democratic debates. Does so many people running for the position of president, does that make your job harder or easier? So I think in some ways it makes it easier for sure. I think there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm around the Democratic primary. I think lots of folks have wanted to be involved because of that. Honestly, I haven't seen too many downsides down ballot, honestly. Folks have, while the presidential primary is important, there are a lot of other races that folks are focused on in Texas other than the presidential race.
And I guess, the million-dollar question, we've seen a couple polls recently where Trump's approval ratings President Trump's approval ratings are under 50%. But then, the Texas Tribune, Texas Public Policy poll, or the Texas Politics Project's poll, when they match President Trump up with individual candidates on the Democratic side, none of them have higher numbers than President Trump. Do you think that any of these candidates on the presidential side can beat President Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm confident that any nominee that we have coming out of the presidential primary can beat Trump, particularly here in Texas. I think the work that we're going to do to expand the electorate is going to push us over the edge to deliver those electoral votes.
Now, why do you think that? Because President Trump won by 9 points, and now that's less than double digits than it was a couple years ago. But in 2016, 9 points is still 9 points, and that's quite a hurdle. So what makes you think that you can beat the Republicans this time when for years and years that hasn't been the case?
Yeah, well, I think you sort of just said it yourself. We've seen incredible movement over time. Cycle over cycle, we're moving in sort of an exponentially better direction for Democrats. That's more the case than pretty much any other battleground state. We're moving towards Democrats faster. I think when you consider how many Democrats we can register to vote in the state, and how many folks we have left to mobilize, I think it's an incredibly clear path to winning statewide.
And I will say that we were looking at the Texas Secretary of State's website to find out exactly how many candidates are running in the March primary for Democrats. 17 people in total, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For president?
Yes, a lot of Democrats there. And also, we wanted to mention that, yes, President Trump is on the Republican primary side. He's filed for that race, obviously. But there are 5 candidates in total running for... or 7. Hold on one second. I have that note. 5, I'll say. 5 running against President Trump too, and Phil, pretty uncontested race there. Would imagine so.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump, especially within the Republican primary voting bloc, President Trump is extremely popular. Nationally, you see a lot of these polls where he's under 50% approval rating, and on polls if he hits 50% on a national poll, that's like one of his best days right now. He's in the 40 to 50% on the general population. But if you look within the Republican primary, he is ridiculously popular, right? Like it is 95% approval rating. You'll have these candidates who like kind of the holdovers from the Never Trumper world from 2016 that will run again, and they're probably just going to get demolished. I mean, he has raised his campaign has raised a crazy amount of money. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars already. I mean, way more than any of the other Democratic candidates so far, except for, I guess, Bloomberg now. I mean, has just like a ridiculous amount of money just with his own personal wealth. So, but yeah, I mean, and that's a question I have to you. Like, when you see how much money that President Trump's campaign can raise, does that worry you? I mean, because it takes money to win sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, no. I mean, it's early in the cycle. He's a sitting president. It's not shocking that he's going to be a beneficiary of institutional money, right? We're working through a primary where folks are having to decide between a slate of candidates who to donate to. So that doesn't worry me too much. We look at past presidential cycles and we know that we have the capacity to outraise Trump, but to muster the resources needed to do the voter contact we have to do. Yeah.
And in addition to the presidential primary, guys, we are also talking about one for the U.S. Senate seat that John Cornyn currently holds at the moment. 12 Democrats have filed for that primary. Is that correct, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 4 Republicans in the Republican primary, though the incumbent John Cornyn likely holds the highest odds of winning that race. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a betting man, you always bet on the incumbent first. I mean, that's somewhat politics 101. Incumbents win generally. Recently the Democrats have been breaking that trend, but I think that John Cornyn is really happy with where he's at now. He's different than Ted Cruz, right? Like, people had very strong opinions about Ted Cruz. A lot of people loved him. A lot of people hated him. So you would see his approval numbers be high. You would also see his disapproval numbers be really high. There's about a third of the population who really doesn't know enough about John Cornyn to make an opinion about him. I guess that's from the Texas Tribune, Texas Politics Project's poll. But he's still in Texas, which is a favorable position to be until something changes. But the Democrats are trying really hard, but at this point, Republicans are still winning statewide races. But I mean, so what are your chances, do you think, of beating John Cornyn?
Yeah, so I want to point a little bit to that, I mean, folks have opinions about Ted Cruz, across the state. I think you're sort of keen to point out that for Cornyn, folks know a little bit less about him, which frankly, like our Democratic candidates and ultimately our nominee are going to be able to educate voters on just, how much of a Trumper Cornyn is, right? How much of an acolyte, how much he's sort of groveled in front of Trump, I think that is information and revelations for voters that is going to be very relevant to the race.
What do you think, in the Republican Party in Texas, is being a very big Trump supporter a bad thing? Because I look at the numbers in the Republican primary, and President Trump's incredibly popular. Like, when you say, John Cornyn is a Trumper, I mean, what makes you think that that's a bad thing, or at least a good thing for you?
Yeah, so I think in general, voters are sort of tired of this kind of politics, right? I mean, we see it at the White House for sure, corruption, deception, but it's the same brand of politics all the way down to the State House, right? With Dennis Bonnen, right? I think that despite like numbers you might see for popularity for Trump and the Republican Party, I think that the fact that Texans in general are turned off by this kind of politics is going to play a large role. I think it's going to mobilize our folks and keep Republicans at home. Who wants to go out and vote for that?
So I mean, does your strategy hinge on Republicans staying home, or if the bucket of Republicans that vote show up to vote, is the Democratic bucket of voters big enough to beat them?
Yeah, I think so. Again, like I think there's a lot of work to do. We got a lot of folks to get out there and register. We have a huge plan to do that.
Yeah.
There are millions of voters to mobilize. So no, I don't think we need to count on sort of Republican voter depression in order to get there.
What's the evidence that you look to because when I hear you say that, I've heard this before
Yeah.
in Texas.
Sure.
You say that the Democratic side has said there are Democratic voters that just don't show up, and we're going to get them out this time.
Yeah.
And then Republicans always bring out more people when it comes to election day. So what's the evidence that you see of your argument?
Yeah, well, we know they exist. Like we can point to them for the most part. We know that folks are moving into the suburbs in large numbers. I mean, we look at like Fort Bend, right, where we currently have a special election. That former Tom DeLay country, right? That has absolutely changed. We have just more folks moving into the state that
So you're banking on the new folks being Democrats.
Yeah. For largely they are. It's a diverse, young, folks of color, the kinds of coalitions that we need to put together to win statewide.
Yeah.
And if you are just joining us, a lot of you are watching on Facebook Live at the moment. We're also live on the KXAN News app and KXAN.com. And if you're just joining us, we have KXAN's political reporter, Phil Prazan, and Tyler Mitchell with the Texas Democrats here talking about candidate filing deadline, which was on Monday. It has passed now, so now we know which candidates will be on the primary ballot next year in March. So to get back to our conversation, guys, we talked about the presidential primary race between the Democrats and Republicans, as well as the Senate race. To just harp on the Senate race again, we saw over the past few days that the Cornyn campaign was fundraising off the possibility of Beto O'Rourke jumping in the race, maybe at the last minute. There were lots of fundraising pushes for that, Phil. But in the end, Beto did not join the race. He kept to his word and said, I'm not doing this. I've told you all, and I didn't jump in.
Yeah, and I think I think the presidential race really kind of closed the door on his Senate race. I mean, he took, I think, some positions that were new to him in the national race. Especially when it comes to guns. He leaned into the gun confiscation of what Republicans would call it. He said that they are going to try and take away folks' fully automatic AR-15s, assault weapons, stuff like that. That I think really would not play well in Texas on a statewide level. And then also he had the getting rid of the tax exemption status for religious organizations who believed in traditional marriage or who did not, support same-sex marriage. That's a tough issue in Texas as well, per the numbers and the historical voting trends. But yeah, I mean, from the Democratic Party side, I mean, were you planning on him getting in the race, or you kind of took him at his word as well?
Yeah, no, took him at his word. I mean, he said that he wasn't going to do it, and in fact, he committed to mustering resources for state house races.
Yes, that is
Yeah, and has done so already.
What is that thing that he has going on? It's a website, or that he promoted. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah.
He's go on. So you hope some of his press and some of his public name and possibly money will come into some of these Texas House races?
Yeah, absolutely. So he's done this already for Elis Markowitz in Fort Bend. Has come out there, has sent fundraising emails, has been of great use over there, and I expect him to do the same thing. I mean, he's smart. He knows that we have to take back the state house this cycle, and that is one of the best uses of his time and resources.
Yeah.
Tyler, how much resources will be put into taking back the Texas House of Reps?
Yeah, a lot. No, I mean, I think that, we from the state party are going to, we have large programmatic things that we're investing in to, get people to vote by mail, to register folks, to mobilize voters. But campaigns themselves are also raising a lot of money and will raise a lot of money. I would expect fundraising this cycle to exceed last cycle, absolutely.
Is there any dollar amount that what's the goal, right? If we have this much money, we can do it.
Yeah, I don't think I can give a specific number.
All
But
right. Okay. To that question, when it comes to the Texas House, what is the goal? Is the goal to take the Texas House, or is the goal just to do better than last time?
No, we're here to win. Like, we're here to.
That's it.
Yeah.
If you don't take the Texas House, it will be a "all shucks, we didn't do what we thought we could."
Right. Like, I'm not here to lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're here to take back more than the 9 state house seats that we need to have a majority in the state house.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any U.S. House races, Tyler, that you think are much more competitive now compared to 2018?
Yeah. We even see organizations like the DCCC. They're currently targeting 6 races and looking to expand. They've already set up offices here. We see folks like Gina Ortiz-Jones in that race, really hitting the ground running and raising some dollars.
Yeah. So if I was someone who always bets on the incumbent, right?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think that you can beat, the Chip Roys of the world, the Michael McCalls of the world, who, have won up until now?
Yeah, incumbency is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think anyone's ever going to argue that, but it's not overcomeable.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can lose with the right resources and under the right circumstances. And I think that's our job, is to put those things together so that candidates can take advantage of that and can get past the finish line.
Is there one that you would say is the lowest hanging fruit out of all the districts?
I don't particularly want to name like a single one that I think is the lowest hanging fruit, because I think that some of the dynamics are just like unpredictable sometimes, right? So I think naming one now, 6 months down the line, that may not be the case.
Yeah.
But we have a slate of races that I think are very winnable and within grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you think that because Republicans are obviously trying to win back the seat in Houston and Dallas that they lost, when it comes to these national issues like impeachment,
Right.
do those Democratic Congress members now taking a stand for impeachment, does that hurt them and make them more vulnerable?
I don't think so, honestly. I think that folks understand both intuitively and in the facts that this is a justified impeachment inquiry. And I don't think that I think voters understand that, and I don't think that that's a liability for those candidates.
All right, well, if you are joining us right now, it's KXAN's political reporter Phil Prazan sitting there with us, and Tyler Mitchell with the Texas Democratic Party. He is the Candidate Services Director. Guys, I think that we will probably wrap up our conversation here in just a few moments.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you want to touch on before our conversation ends and before we pull down our live stream?
I mean, I'm watching the Texas House just because it is so close. Do you have anything special planned for the Texas House, or are you relying on the presidential campaign, the Senate campaign, these congressional campaigns to lift up the Democrats that are running against the House seats?
No, I actually think it's very much the opposite, right? I think that the power of mobilization and getting voters out there is sort of a reverse coattails in a lot of ways. We saw this particularly last cycle, and I think it'll happen again this cycle, where we had strong state house races that were running strong campaigns. We saw that lift up everywhere. And I think we're investing in making sure that we're supporting state house candidates so that they can run good professional campaigns. I think that's going to lift everybody up.
Do you have candidates versus all of the incumbent Republicans
As in
the state house?
Oh, right. So we have more. We've recruited more candidates in the state house than the Republicans have. I think it's like 122 is the number.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one question I had for you, Tyler, was is there now a Democrat to match every Republican running in every race throughout the state? I'd heard that, but I wanted to get official confirmation on it.
Right. So for congressionals, we're contesting every race. A state house, not every seat, but all of our competitive seats are covered. More than covered. We have contested primaries in several of them.
Is that different than previous years?
Yeah, for sure. So I think this is the second highest level of recruitment we've had in decades. I think pretty much ever. Yeah.
Wow. Again, you've been listening to KXAN's political reporter, Phil Prazan, joining me here in the KXAN live studio with Tyler Mitchell with the Texas Democratic Party. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. At one point, we had more than 200 people watching our conversation today. And I will tell you all that are watching from home right now, we are working to get someone from the Texas Republicans to join us here for a very similar conversation, just so that we can have that and talk about a very exciting time for Texas politics, no matter where you stand on the aisle, that's for sure. Guys, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
And we hope that you all have a great Wednesday, and we will see you back here on KXAN Live.